Hi, everybody. This is Kevin from City Hook and the Dublin Travel Massive team. You're watching the live show with Travel Massive. Sorry for the small delay kicking off. There have been some gremlins while we've been trying to conquer all of that and get going. So this is the live show from Travel Massive. In this episode, we've called it The Lockdown. We've got four special guests joining us to talk about the situation caused by the COVID-19 crisis in the travel business. My first guest will be Alex Bainbridge. We'll follow that with Tom Buckley, our chapter leader from New York. We have Kim Whitaker joining us from South Africa, followed by Sherry Ott in Colorado. I'd like to thank all of my guests for taking part today. If you're managed to be watching this live on Facebook or YouTube, the only place that you can chat with us and take part is on the Zoom link. You can find all details to that on travelmassive.com. Feel free to throw any questions at us. I'll do my very best to get to them. My partner in crime today is Maria Stoyanova, based in Bulgaria today. She'll be producing the event, so if you have any important questions to get to us live, make sure you raise them with her, and I'll do basically anything Maria tells me during the show. We'll try and have you on at the end of the show if you've got a great story to share, or if you'd like to take part in a future episode. The email address to reach out to is live@travelmassive.com. Alex, based in a little hamlet outside of Oxford, United Kingdom, how are you getting on today?
I'm doing very well. I actually am, as a technologist, I tend to work from home anyway. So to me, this is like, I've got 15 years experience of working from home. So this has turned out not to be too much different than normal. So so at least from the working from home perspective, I'm feeling pretty good.
We've had an interesting week, I think, in the travel business. We've seen even more announcements of, I think the initial impact of the crisis was very obvious once ITB was cancelled. It was our signal to say that things are different now. News-wise, of course, we've just seen the increasing tragedy in northern Italy and throughout Italy as well. But it is in a tiny little shimmer of good news, and I have to look at this silver lining to really find this one. For the first time, there are no new internal cases in China, so maybe there's a signal there. We'll wait a couple of days to see what that's like. Over the last week, though, in Europe and around the world, we've seen, to a different degree, in Ireland it's different than France, for example, to Germany and all across Europe, we've had the lockdown. So either we are in total isolation or we have an effective social isolation imposed. When you work from home, like you said, Alex, that's not really the end of the world. You had big plans for ITB.
Yeah. Yeah, we just spent a couple of years. I sold my last business 3-4 years ago, Tour CMS, which was the early leader in tours and activities distribution. So I spent the last few years trying to work out what comes next in tours and activities. Didn't expect this, of course. And was just about to announce at ITB our new sightseeing robot called Sarah. But we haven't actually announced it yet now because we didn't do anything at ITB.
First time I've heard the name.
So that was an unannouncement announcement. Okay. So really, it's kind of really messed us up. But in slightly good news, fundamentally, as a startup, you're pretty much running on fumes anyway. So to cut back down to zero out when you've got zero coming in, it wasn't so painful. So we'll survive. But I just don't like the way that it's impacting the industry that I've been in for the last 20 years. But from our own personal perspective, we've actually come out of it okay. I'm not exactly jumping up and down with excitement, but it is okay. And therefore that's why I've got more time on my hands to actually spend more time assisting other tour companies who are in trouble because we don't have too many of our own problems.
No, Alex, you're people that know you will know you for your involvement through Tour CMS in the tours and activity space.
Yep.
Like there's different ways of naming that, but look, it's the broad, in destination activities.
Well, actually, historically, in 2012, I was the person who actually named the industry Tours and Activities.
Of course.
But anyway,
what happens to
with
that
3 others
sector? What happens to that sector when there is pressure on it?
The fundamental problem with tours and activities is that it's booked very, very last minute, and it's booked when people get to their destination. So it's not something people tend to plan for. So as a result of this kind of disruption is very bad. Arrival, who does research and runs conferences in this sector, their sort of research at this point says 25% failure of companies, and I'm sort of planning on that percentage, or even maybe up to 50% supplier failure in the next few months. Really seeing how it plays out, which is not a good situation at all.
I wouldn't have expected it to be that high, Alex. I mean, is this time of the year a key time in terms of cash flow for a tour and activities company? I mean, it's still March. I know it's mid-March. It's past St. Patrick's Day here. It's coming up towards Easter when things really start to peak. But is it really crunch time today, or is it just projected to get bad and worse?
I mean, obviously, different destinations have got different impacts. But if you take some of the UK tour operators, for example, and many of the Northern European operators, they will run at a loss through the winter and run at a profit through the summer. So they, at this particular point in time, this is the point where they're carrying the heaviest debts in order to, and so you lose the summer and you've got a problem.
It's different though when you're a technology company like my company and yours. You know, you were saying earlier that the IP, you know, that's the kind of companies we are. You know,
we spent 3-4 years now building a technology platform. You actually fundamentally can't close your business because if you close your business, if you sell, okay, fine, but if you close, the IP, i.e., all the code, effectively hands back to the UK state, or at least that's the law here. So if you go bust, for example. So you really don't have much choice. If you spent a few years building something and you think this might be a 1-year issue, you just have to
weather it out
because there is no other option.
Because when to talk about IP is something maybe a little bit too dry for most listeners, but it's the soul of the technology company. There is no technology company without it. You know, the icons, everything goes. You know, it's not just something
absolutely.
Or,
and you need to compare that to, for example, to a local tour and activity company who may not have any vehicles, may not have any significant assets, and they are predominantly tour guides. They could close their business and restart in 12 months' time and not carry the 12 months of losses that are about to happen. So that, so companies who run tour guides have an option. So every failure that you see coming up now, because it's all going to be headlines for the next few weeks, not necessarily all of those failures are bad. Some of those will have been purposely put to bed so that they can close down, at least with some funds in place, and then make it slightly easier to restart again in, let's say, 9 months, 12 months time. So if you don't have any assets and you don't lose anything by shutting your business, you can restart in 12 months time relatively easy. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying it's at least possible to do that.
It's a kind of a financial operation that you're describing there. And look, it's perfectly legitimate in most cases, even if it is intentional. But at the same time, Alex, I think you've got a unique perspective on the business. Having worked with so many different tours and activities companies, we've had a few different tour operators on talking about their content on previous live shows. But you've had a perspective through multiple different types and categories. And I know we could enumerate all of them, but in general, these are small businesses, 2 or 3 man, if you'll excuse the expression, 2 or 3 man operations, and then an awful lot of seasonal work. So it is possible for some.
If you think about it, to set up a small hotel or a small accommodation kind of business, you need to find the capital for that location. To set up a local tour and activity company and hire 5 tour guides, you need to build up a website, you need to get some local relationships, and you need to start talking to the big online travel agents. That is all you need to do. So it's fundamentally a much simpler thing to do. And that's the reason why you'll get people who are taking career breaks, who may have worked in an office until their 30s, and they go, oh, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to go mountain bike tours. And it's much easier for them because there isn't such a large capital setup cost, which is good, but also it's bad in times like this.
Talk a little bit about Tourmageddon. You went live with this just yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. What is Tourmageddon, and why are you spending energy on this?
So fundamentally, I'm a builder. So as a builder entrepreneur, I can build things. So in times of trouble like this, what do? I'll start building. So we built Tourmageddon because there is just so much information about what companies should do if you're in local tours and activities. And the majority of it is being presented chronologically. And that causes just overload.
It's in the feed, it's in Twitter, it's in LinkedIn.
Yeah, so, I talked to a tour operator earlier on today, and they were saying, up until a couple of days ago, they were doing 150 cancellations a day per member of staff. And I'm like, okay, well, that's not so straightforward. They don't have time to sit there looking at resources and trying to fathom out what on earth they should do.
But this is a case of getting worse before it gets better. Like the first thing you have to do with your staff is to pump energy and effort into managing cancellations.
Yeah, so basically the idea was to put all the information in one place that is useful and really starts the recovery period, because that's really what we're focused on, is recovery. But also we've got 10 or 11 individuals who have offered their time as volunteers to say that they are able to have one-on-one phone calls or Skype calls or whatever it is with local tour operators around the world. So we've got 10 or 11 people on there, all with completely different skills and backgrounds, who are waiting for your emails or your to say, hey, I want to talk to you. Let me chat through this problem. And we're there for you, really. So we've been building a support network.
The support is just to give us a color of it, Alex. What kind of things can we expect to find there, and what should people contribute if they have anything?
Well, for example, on the recovery side of things, one of the things that we're looking at the moment is how do you make best use of your tour guides without having to make them all redundant. If you've got commitments to your tour guides and you've got no tours to run, then, for example, Get Your Guide with their tour guides are beginning to do a quiz show. In fact, their first quiz show is this evening. It's going to be on, I don't quite know, actually. If you go on my Twitter, I've tweeted it earlier on. It's on the website. It's on Tourmageddon. You can go and see where it is. Then Context Travel, which is a big US tour operator. They have started running seminars with their tour guides. So one of the things we started doing on Tourmageddon is really just listing all the different ways people are using their tour guides to make best use of the time. And what exactly, what can you do with your tour guides in order to A, keep them busy, B, keep some revenue coming in, and C, just keep in marketing to your potential customers that, hey, this is going to be over at some point, and we really want you to come back to our destination and take a tour.
Do you think it's peaked, Alex? And how do we restart?
I don't know what peak means. I mean, medically, in the Far East at the moment, there's been a peak. But restarting requires two things. Firstly, it requires the medical issue to be resolved. Yeah, that's one thing. Of course. But secondly, international travel has to be restarted, and it's not entirely clear when permission for international travel will be restarting. So sort of one of the planning scenarios that I'm working on is that we may be medically clear by the middle of this year, but we may only be doing domestic travel for 6 months. So if you've got a good domestic travel customer base, fantastic, because you'll be back trading, you'll be turning over money, etc. But if your entire business is based around international travel, then that's where the challenge will be. I'm not making that as a prediction. I'm saying that as a planning scenario. And the difference between a planning scenario and a prediction is you just have to work on the theory that one of various different options is going to happen. And you work down various different planning scenarios and go, right, if this happens, we do this. If this happens, we do that. It's not a prediction. It's just, if this happens, then be ready, then you are ready for it. And as I said, the main planning prediction that I'm working on, the planning scenario I'm working on, is medically over, but reduced international travel.
Is it the end of the season, though, Alex? Should your typical, and I will say European or even Northern Hemisphere, North America as well, should they just plan for a local market at best for their peak season between July and August, for example?
I think so. I mean, I think medically in the UK, we're like 8 to 10 weeks away from what they've described as peak. So you can assume that it's going to get better in July. Maybe we'll be traveling again in July, August, but only on a local basis. Yeah, okay. I don't know. I hope we're not still sat in our houses in 4 months' time.
I don't know. I'm enjoying the family time. And I won't ever say this again, but I do miss the airport. Alex, we're going to have you back on towards the end for a last word, if you don't mind, but we have a lot to get through today. We've got some great panelists. Timothy, we see your question, and I'm dying to figure out how to get you on, so I've asked Maria to check in with you to see how we can include you, if at all possible. But Tom Buckley, our chapter leader based in New York, I want to bring you in because it seems like there was a seismic shift in policy that just makes the US topical all of a sudden. It looks like there's something happening there, but I want to focus very selfishly on you for just a moment. How have you been impacted? And tell me a little bit about what the situation is like for you personally there in Brooklyn.
Sure, Kevin. So I came back from the UK on Monday. I was greeted by the CDC, which is the federal agents off the plane, who took my temperature and were curious to know where I'd been. So I'm now in self-isolation, which I'm sure a lot of people on this call are too, and I'm honoring that. How that's sort of percolated through within the US in terms of best practice remains to be seen. Also on a personal level, I launched a business in February with my business partner, which is a marketing agency addressing travel and tourism brands with digital marketing and brand consultancy. So not the best timing at all. We have offices that we maintain in Brooklyn and New York, which in Manhattan, which we are scaling back on. So we do have the privilege of not having a lot of expenditure and overheads. We have a very big client that we're overseeing a project for that is in the multi-day space, but we also do stuff in the single-day space and work with tech and DMOs as well. So we're getting some insights from them, but also from some of the tour operators and tech brands that we've been speaking to in North America. We've been getting some very interesting insights. But so from a personal perspective, what's happening to me is no different, I think, to some of the other panelists on this call, and that we're all in self-quarantine. But from a company perspective, it's interesting, but there are other people that are worse off. But insights from one of our main global multi-day clients is they're seeing a drop in organic search to the tune of 87%. In terms of, which is fine, they actually have some very good crisis management protocols in place, and they have the benefit of having a very large parent company that is going to be helping them with cash flow, and they've already written off various months of their business for this year. So they're looking 3 months, 6 months down the line, and we're seeing that as a pattern for other kind of multi-day tour operators too, as well as for some single days too. But we're also hearing about some layoffs that have happened in the last 2 weeks in both the single day and multi-day space. I'm not going to name any names. Some on the West Coast, some on the East Coast. There have been 62 people laid off at one particular company. In the multi-day, 40 people in another single-day company. We've seen cessation of services for a local tour operator here in New York that's part of a bigger group, where they're holding back from doing anything until the 1st of June, as we've seen in the airline space with the likes of Porter Airlines and so on. So we're seeing different approaches to it, but it really comes down to, with tour operators, the extent to which they have liquidity, how many, what assets they have. Some are very asset light, and also the extent to which they have that sort of operational agility. There are some big multi-days in the adventure space that have scaled back their operations to the tune of 90%, that are global companies. And I think that's what tour operators are there for doing, is sort of ratcheting up or ratcheting down. Some it's easier than others. And so, some of those obviously can convert very easily to remote working. So we're seeing some kind of interesting examples out there of how people are coping. But
So
we all,
operations keep going, Tom.
right.
I'm just thinking there's two numbers I want to explore a little bit with you. The 87% of organic search traffic is going to be that's a signal for me. Sorry, I was expecting a drop, but 87% drop in organic. Does that mean that people are spending more on paid search to keep revenue coming in, or what's the first impact of that? Is it just direct correlation to drops in
Well,
bookings?
we don't
Take me
really
through
get
that.
involved in the paid game. I think there's been a lot of upset brands who are kind of upset with some of the performance marketing platforms, the extent to which they've been quite greedy. And our kind of proposition is all about how brands can better leverage some of the more organic approaches there, which include indeed kind of working on their own brand. And I think that's going to be a big area where we're going to see a lot more sort of direct play within the market, within all spheres. Be interesting to see the extent to which the OTAs have been able to claw back some ground off Google as well, which they did post 9/11. Yeah. But I think for a lot of people, it's, you know, do you spend time trying to win people in the discovery phase of the travel cycle at the moment, or do you just show empathy? And do you spend most of your time, of tour operators at least, working with your teams on the customer care departments, ensuring that your operator clients and the likes, or your customers, are seen to in terms of rebooking, or if you're a technology platform, whether your operators can have their dates blocked out and be assisted and helped with best practice in any way.
Talk then about the types of, look, some of the stats we've seen come through. I can't remember the source on this one. If I can, I'll put it into the show notes that go out after the event. But globally, we're expecting somewhere between 12 and 15 million layoffs in travel-related activity. Now, whether that's air or you know, tour operators or guides, whatever. The first estimate was somewhere between 12 and 15 million redundancies. Do you have any perspective on what roles are going for your in your circle there, Tom? Is it operational? Is it the kind of, you know, tour delivery staff? Is it across the board? Do you have a perspective on that?
I think it's a mix. So for some of the single day technology platforms, it's the sales teams. It's been the hiring managers. Because you don't have a sales team, there are less implementations to do. So the implementation people are said goodbye to. So it has a sort of, like all these things, a sort of cascading impact. In terms of operators, it's the sales teams are the first to go, I think. And then some operational people. I think senior people are there to help kind of replan, restructure, reorg, and are a bit more untouchable. But you know, in the hospitality space, I know that there are concerns that up to 50% of hotels will have to close, and there's a lot of frontline staff that are obviously going to have to go. And it's a question of, you know, when some of these associations are going to Capitol Hill to ask for money and asking for sizable sums of anything between 7 and 150 billion. It's a question as to where some of that money will go to, in terms of whether it's going to be paying out some of the investors or stakeholders, or whether a better approach indeed is giving checks to people and making sure it goes into consumers' hands who can spend, you know, their own way, and it can kind of filter through accordingly.
So among your clients and among the chapter there in New York, what is the feeling? Is it a sense that, and I'm going to use the word again, peak, but what I'm really trying to see is there a sense of looking beyond the crisis? Are people talking about what it's going to be like to rebuild? Or are they still in the thick of the crunch itself?
Having been in Europe last week and coming back to the US, there's a big difference in terms of the level of education here in North America. And it's by no fault of the leadership that we have in North America that it hasn't really sort of percolated through. It depends, different states are acting differently. We now have Corona in all 50 states within the US, so we have a long way to go. We're in the kind of, not even in the eye of the storm at the moment. The governor of New York State Governor Cuomo has said that we've got 45 days till we get to the peak of that. Who knows whether that's the case? I think that's a very conservative estimate. But I think the extent to which people are obeying the stay-at-home order differs from state to state. In California, you have something which is called shelter in place, where people can be given a misdemeanor for wandering outside for breaking the shelter in place order. We don't have anything of that nature here in New York, but people have been asked to stay at home. The schools kind of were closed down on Monday. I think there's a huge educational gap and there's a huge lack of information. It's very, very disorganized in North America.
From a business perspective, Tom, is there a sense of, again, among clients and among chapter members, is there a sense that it's here, it's impacting us, and are we looking to the future, or are we still trying to figure out what to do now? Can you give a sense of where that is? I know you've been away for a while, but what's the feeling on the ground there, at least?
I think businesses, it really depends. So some have a sort of 3-month plan. Some have a 6-month plan. Those that can have written off some of that business, and they're doing kind of planning as to how they can pull together more domestic product for staycations and the likes for those periods as when it picks up. Some people have seen successes there, but it really differs. But a lot of people are in disaster mode, and they're just treading water and waiting for valuable bits of information on a day-to-day basis. So it's a real mix that we're seeing here.
And just on a more light-hearted note, what is I know you're in self-isolation there, but do you have a sense, even through media or social media, what it's like outside the door in Brooklyn and New York at the moment? Is there that kind of post-Hurricane Sandy New Yorker spirit come to fight the virus together, or is it that classic New York defiance, or is it still, like I said, ready to come in? I mean,
there is that fantastic stoicism that New Yorkers have. So they're getting by. I haven't ventured out onto the streets, but prior to having gone, there was a lot of humor to it, and there was a lot of spirit. And here in Brooklyn, it's very different to Manhattan, where people kind of club together. There's a pro bono spirit and community. So we'll be seeing a lot of that. But I think that's a good before kind of you move on to the next guest. I think that's something that we should all be looking at, is ways that we can do more pro bono things for the travel industry, which it deeply needs. Tormageddon's a fantastic initiative that Alex is spearheading with Chris Torres. We as a business, Wildebeest, are going to be doing a lot of pro bono work with Voyager HQ, which is an important incubator here in the States. It has a presence in Europe as well. Yeah. And we're going to be helping some of the tour operator communities with seminars on disaster management best practice. And I think everyone needs to scratch their heads and think how they can contribute accordingly, because it's where the states and kind of the executive of different countries aren't really taking the initiative and the lead. I think it has to be a grassroots kind of issue too.
Before I bring in Kim, I might just spin that question around another way, Tom, if you don't mind. But what is the one thing you wish somebody had asked you to help your business? What is the one thing that you wish somebody could have done to help you, and how can we extend that to other actors in the business?
It's a good question, because there's a lot of these small business loan initiatives that have been worked on in the UK and North America, which is good for people that have overheads and the likes, and helps them maintain for longer. I think probably it's information, having a strong leader that can have a czar that can tell people what really is the projection, the modeling for each different country. China is a centralized economy. It's done fantastically to claw back efforts. Here in North America, the health system is very fragmented. So I think if there was better information and better kind of anticipation of some of these things, then great. But I think it comes down to information for businesses.
I think the coordination has been one of the key things we've seen as a pain point from our first show. Was one of the first things that people found not everybody got the message. So you had hotels charging people for people's stays during ITB anyway. This kind of crazy stuff happening. Everything isn't quite coordinated yet, and I think that'll be one of the things that we do leave the crisis, I think, as one of the learning points. If you're just joining us, this is the live show from Travel Massive. I'm Kevin O'Shaughnessy here in Dublin. The show is produced by Maria Stoyanova over in Bulgaria. We have 2 more guests to go. We started late. We'll finish at about 12 minutes past the hour. If you have any comments or questions, the place to do it is on the Zoom webinar link that you'll find over on travelmassive.com. If you're on YouTube or Facebook, welcome. Thanks for joining us. The chat is only available on Zoom, so please drop over there and join us there. We'll be trying to fit in any questions we find along the way to our guests and our panelists, and we'll be asking them all one tough question before the end. But I do want to bring in Kim Whitaker from South Africa. She's based in Cape Town, and I know Kim's had a rough week, but she might have to drop off sometime before the end of the show. So I do want to bring you in next, Kim. Just if you don't mind me introducing it, and I'll let you take over. You've been diagnosed, sadly, you've been diagnosed positive, and you've made a very touching and great write-up about that, your trip to Berlin, everything, and coming back and getting the diagnosis publicly. So I know you won't mind me saying it, but can you tell me a little bit about how it's impacted you in the immediate term? What's changed?
All right, thank you so much. I think it's more apt to maybe say what hasn't changed. I mean, like everything has changed. I mean, I think the whole world as I know it has changed. I guess we've been in self-quarantine or isolation now for 8 days. I touched down in Cape Town last week, and I was so ready to like put in action plans, hit the ground running. I'd been to Europe. I was a week ahead. I saw how quickly things escalated. And then I arrived home, and the school asked me to go into self-quarantine. And I was like, no ways, I can't afford that. I need to be like at the office right now doing my work. But I obviously honored their request, and we went almost straight into self-quarantine, and then I got tested. And then finding out I was positive, obviously then I had popped into the office, so my entire team had to then go into self-quarantine. And thank goodness we run 95% of our work online in any case at the head office. So they've just done an amazing job of picking up and carrying on with the ball. But of course, our core business is running hub hotels in Cape Town and Johannesburg, where we sleep up to 150 people in each property every night. So that has been a huge adjustment, not being able to be there for my team. I haven't even seen them through all of this.
You went straight into project management mode,
Yeah.
It's like, do I have to okay, let's get the test done, get in and out, get out, and just see what happens next. You're always thinking about business and how to keep things going. How are operations in the meantime? What's been the impact there? And just to be clear, if you don't mind, I was rude enough not to introduce you. Can you just give me a 20-second pitch about your business, Kim? Because I just want to make it clear that you're not just some person who has the virus. You're actually a very active member of the travel community in South Africa.
Yes.
Tell me about the business.
So I co-founded Once Travel. It's a experiences and hub hotel company in South Africa. We've got 2 properties, one in Cape Town and one in Johannesburg, called Once in Cape Town and Once in Joburg. And obviously, it's all about bringing young people together, communal spirit, and all about storytelling. So we've been particularly hard hit, obviously, like everyone in the travel industry. And I think the challenging thing is, as I said, my team are at the front line of where it's happening right now. And yet tonight we're at over 90% occupancy because people need a place to sleep before they leave, So we've got people scrambling to get out of South Africa. I mean, I guess it's your classic, fight or flight reaction to any sort of stress. You want to go back home where there's safety and there's comfort. And so, you know, that's something that is on our mind.
Is it so you're still in a very strange way, you're still operating, I won't say as usual, but you're
No,
still
like it will change. You know, I saw
Yeah.
this happening in Europe as well. The hostels, particularly, or the hotels, they're super full with people scrambling to get out, and then, you know, a day later you're at 50%, 2 days later you're at 20%, a day later you're at
100
5.
to
Yeah.
0.
Yeah. So
Okay.
we knew this would happen. But operationally, you know, it's been retraining the staff, putting in extra health precautions. We have a Corona internal WhatsApp line where people can text our, you know, head of health and safety and ask if they have any concerns or questions about embassies or flights or getting tested. You know, getting the staff really aware of, you know, hand washing, gloves, contact, etc. And that's happened in a very short period of time.
What's the has it been the same kind of crunch as well from a cancellations perspective? Have your staff been inundated with support and help and cancellation calls like other operators?
Yeah, so I mean, last Wednesday we had one cancellation, and as of yesterday, I think pretty much all our future business is cancelled.
Wow.
So yeah, a lot of people are choosing to defer their travels to 2021, which I just find amazing. You know, we've seen a few emails coming through like, hi, I was going to come and stay with you, but you know what, I can't come, but I'll come next year. I'll come in March 2021. Just hold my booking for me. So, you know, there's light at the end of the tunnel. We've seen a lot of compassion in that regard. With regards to cancellations, we've you know, we've set up a staff fund, which is run through our nonprofit. So basically, you know, we're giving our guests the option of donating their deposit towards our staff fund. At this point in time, like someone else alluded now in the chats, there's a lot of uncertainty around how our government will be able to support those from under-resourced communities, because we, you know, our fiscus is not as strong as the UK, the US, Europe. And so until they have an answer, we really are, you know, focusing on our team and making sure that they get through the next few months.
But I feel like I have to though. What do you guys do for the next few months? I mean, and I don't want to kind of poke you to say, are you going to make everybody redundant just to survive? But I'm kind of curious, how are you going to survive? What are you going to do in the meantime?
Look, I think that when you, as humans, when you're faced in a crisis, you do have a fight or flight reaction, right? And I've noticed it when people found out I was, people say I have a disease. I feel great, by the way. I feel absolutely fine. So
sorry, but
yeah, like,
one of the side effects of it, really. It's sometimes you feel great, but you know, the vulnerable get affected. Sorry, but
no, but what I'm saying is, you know, from a business perspective, when people find out that I'm, you know, that I've tested positive, some will text like, I'm so sorry. If you need groceries, let me know. Let's make a plan. Let me help you. And so they want to, like, you know, be positive and sort of fight the reality. And then you get some who are like, hi Kim, heard you're positive. Where can I get tested? And that's the, like, I've got to run. I've got to get home. I've got to get out of here. I've got to protect. I've got to, you know, I've got to preserve. And so that's when you get people traveling back home, getting on an airplane, traveling back home, which is also, I guess, slightly problematic. But my point is, I think my perspective has changed over the last week tremendously. From a capitalist, you know, balance sheet and income statement point of view, it makes sense to, like, close the business and wait. But we can't do that. Like, there's just, you know, I think people look back to this time and go, well, how did you respond as a leader? And we can't do that because we don't have necessarily the guarantee of government support that other countries have. So we need to do whatever we can in our private capacities to keep everything afloat. So I don't know what that'll mean to people who need to pay their cars off or pay their bonds and pay their rent. You know, we're having very human conversations with landlords and cutting our overheads, like, off, you know. and staff suddenly become our absolute priority.
A question that's come in, and I do want to circle around the different speakers with this one, but I thought I'd put it to you, Kim, as well. How do you keep your brand going in the meantime? Are you now doubling down efforts on keeping messaging going so you can drive up demand for 2021? Is this year's season over and it's just a question of let's get 2021 working? Or are you going to start working on the local market a little bit? What do you do for branding in the meantime? Is there a brand in the meantime?
Honestly, this has been a question that is so tough to answer, because like I pride ourselves at having a strong brand. We have very, very loyal guests who we cherish dearly. So we're communicating often and frequently with them, letting them know what we're doing in terms of health and safety and precautions. And then, I guess I'm not entirely sure. I mean,
Well, actually, I think you have it there. I mean, when you think about what marketing is, it's messaging. Messaging, and right, you kind of put it right there. You're communicating around how you're responding first, and maybe that's the right way to leave it. It's how you're reacting to it, how you're working locally with people, and maybe that's the right kind of messaging to be doing. Focus first on customers that are there, focus then on the team that's going to remain, then around the local community. And I think that's maybe the right approach. I like the answer, to be honest, and it reminded me that, look, marketing is really just good messaging. That's the way you had it. Looking towards, I mean, you mentioned on our pre-call there that, from a local perspective, 90% of leisure tourism traffic comes from the US and Europe. Visas are the instrument of movement there, and they've just stopped. So that's it. But can you give me a sense of, and I know I've brought it up a couple of times with you, what's your view for the future? You bullish?
Wow, that's a tough one. I think we're in the thick of it right now. My colleagues and friends are closing their businesses every day. Some who are asset light are they're just sort of hibernating. Others are just saying, today is the toughest day of my life. After 15 years, I've let everyone go and I've closed the doors. And a week ago, we were organizing, events and doing all kinds of fun things. And so that's where we are at right now. We're at that make or break scenario. So the outlook, it's very difficult. We have a very, very high rate of HIV, AIDS, TB. There are a lot of vulnerable people in our community, and there are 1,700 ICU beds open. So the rate of infection is soaring every day. It's still localized, it's still with travelers, but I think there's been one secondary infection already. And so, everyone's fear is, when's it going to hit the townships where people are commuting to work on a minibus, crammed into a minibus, and when we're just waiting for that day, and then we don't know, we can't even imagine the chaos of, that when you look at the numbers, I don't know what's worse, the health crisis or the economic crisis, but they're intertwined. And someone said the other day, in fact, my husband said the other day, this feels like 1993. He's a bit older than me. I don't even remember 1993, but, he said, it was like just before the end of apartheid, and there was this apprehension, what's going to happen, and no one knew. And there was this angst in the air, and everyone is worried about turmoil and disaster. And somehow the South African people got through it, but it's very, very difficult to see through it, because government is not where, I guess, the Northern Hemisphere is.
I have time to bring on Sherry Ott. Kim, I have to say thank you for joining us. It was very much a last minute thing, and I know that mountains were moved technically to get you on. I do want to press pause in the conversation, if you don't mind, and maybe have you back on a future episode just to see how things are going. We do want to trace the genome of recovery, and I think your story is one worth following. So if you don't mind, we'll see you back here, either on the live show or the Travel Massive podcast in the near future. So for now, if you have to dash and there's a blur on your webcam running away, that's quite all right.
Thank you.
Kim, thank you so much for joining us.
All the best.
Thank you, Kim. So Sherry Ott from Denver, Colorado. You're also in self-isolation. That's the theme of today's show, the lockdown. Sherry is our chapter leader there from Colorado and in Denver. And she works quite a lot with destination marketing organizations, the DMOs, tourism businesses and brands to work with, and so very much on the forefront of messaging, content creation, and so on. Sherry, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Very good. So just your own personal story, if you don't mind. We'll follow that format. What's the impact on you currently at the moment from either a personal or business perspective? Give me a sense of how things are going there.
I would say, gosh, first of all, primarily, I'm a blogger. I've been blogging about travel and writing about travel since 2006.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been in this for a long time. I would say personally, personal and business, how this is affecting me is, I think as Tom noted, traffic is down quite a bit. As bloggers, I depend, as a blogger, I depend on a couple different forms of revenue. One is passive revenue from traffic to my site and ads, as well as affiliate revenue. So ad revenue and affiliate revenue. And then the other work that I do is really with, as you noted, DMOs, brands, tour companies, for exposure, content creation. That has completely dried up. I'm not talking to anyone about doing that. As far as the passive income side, with my traffic right now is 30% down just this month, or from week to week, kind of, it's just tanking. However, I think it will level off there, because bloggers are really we're less transactional and more inspirational. So I'm hoping there's still people searching for inspiration. So I would say overall for me, my revenue is probably going to be down around 80%. All of my work with DMOs, et cetera, for content creation is gone. And then my other just kind of keeps on falling. So
that's a very honest account, Sherry. Wow. What happens in the meantime? I mean, you've got that first impact there. Is there another line of business that can keep you afloat? Is there, are you looking towards, new types of activity in the travel business or outside the travel business? How do you keep the lights on?
It's a good question. I think in some ways, I was just thinking about this when I was listening to the other speakers. I'm back to like blogging like it was 2006 again, where seriously, where no one was paying me. I was doing it out of pure passion. And, you were working on building audience. And that is one of the things that I am spending a lot of time on, audience, as well as some other back end stuff. And then other ways, like I think many bloggers out there, we do a lot of different things. I also run social media for a company that is outside of the travel industry. So I suppose that's how I've diversified. They are being hit, but not nearly like the travel industry. So I'm kind of, spending more time on some of their stuff in social media. I'm sure that'll start to decrease a little bit too. But yeah, I think I'm just I've really reverted back to like 2006 and just trying to speak to audience for the most part.
When I think about some of our notes from the pre-call earlier, There's a certain feeling of housekeeping that you could be doing as well. But
Oh,
does that,
yes.
when you're doing, when you said it there, there's a little bit of beauty in it. Does it mean that you're able to find your new voice? Are you experimenting a little bit with the type of content you're working on? I know the housekeeping will
Yeah.
happen, but is there something else that you're doing as well? A little bit of R&D from a content perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. In some ways, it's kind of the silver lining, I suppose, is it feels passionate again in a way.
Okay.
So really trying to connect with people. One of the things I'm trying to do, because it's something I can control as opposed to Google and algorithms that I can't, is really build up my newsletter again and make it really personal. Some about travel, some about personal stuff, really talking to people, asking how they're doing. That's the other beauty of being on social media. It's really trying to connect with people again. And that stuff I can control. And if I do it right and build it up during this downtime, hopefully when it all comes back, I'll have a stronger audience and community. So that's kind of how I've looked at it at this point.
What kind of, well, you have part of your otsworld.com activity, your main blog there. You do engage quite a lot with the travel brands. You know, I mean, are they even taking your call at this stage, or what is the kind of conversation like when they do?
You know what? Honestly, I've kind of been leaving them alone in a way. I know they have a lot of stuff going on. So normally I would wake up in the morning and have a whole bunch of emails where I'm planning logistics and contracts and stuff like that, where I'm trying to figure out, okay, I'm going here next. We've got to figure this out. This is due then. All of that has completely, I wake up and I have no emails now. It's really weird. But I've really kind of left them be until we know more about what's happening. I think at this point, I don't have any trips called off, but my next trip wasn't scheduled until the end of April. And that was happens to be with a US small bike tour company. You know, I'm just going to let it settle out. I can be kind of last minute on it if we still want to do it. Depends on what happens by then. Odds are it probably won't happen. But other than that, I mean, I've been in contact with people kind of personally, because you get to know all of these companies and the people in the DMOs quite personally, and, you know, talk to them more on that nature. But I don't think anyone really knows yet what they're doing from a business side.
You're also the chapter leader there in Denver. And you've been quite active virtually. You know, we can't really meet. It's kind of gone out of fashion to meet in a pub in Dublin. Band, but you're meeting virtually with folks through your Facebook group. You're quite active. What are the voices there telling you what's happening?
Well, honestly, we are trying to get our act together to meet virtually. We haven't quite been there yet. We had some stuff planned. We are trying to get that together. Just trying to get information out to people, stuff like this. We do have a number of people that we're ready to kind of try to pull together a talk that's more local, with bringing on the Colorado tourism rep that's active in our community, as well as some other tour operators, tour agents. So we're trying to get those conversations going so people can have a more local conversation, which I think is also quite important at this time. So
speaking of local, you were telling us earlier that you had some great snow.
Oh yeah, it's snowing now.
It's snowing now, which is great
Yes.
for ski, but apparently skiing is shut for the rest of the season now. That's got to be devastating locally.
Yeah, it's a big blow for Colorado. Last Saturday, the governor basically shut down all ski operations in the mountains, and it's quite devastating for everyone. Specifically, go ahead.
So did the governor shut it down indefinitely, or for the season? Was there any kind of deterministic kind of date on it, or what happened?
I actually don't know if there was a date. If there was, it was probably about a month, but we're towards the end of the season anyway. And what has happened is I think the majority of the ski hills have just shut down operations altogether and said, we're done for the season. It's easier for their perspective probably to let people go.
It's a commercial call at that stage. One last note, and I do want to get to everybody else with this question too, but I'll go straight into it with yourself, Sherry. You were saying as well that there's already a bit of a pickup from Chinese destination marketing organizations when it comes to content creation. That's got to be positive, right? They're planning for the future. It's starting to maybe pick up again. I don't want to be positive prematurely here, but I got a bit of a positive spin from that.
Yeah, I think the one thing, at least in the blogger and content creation world, that we can hope for is that when businesses do start coming back and when the travel starts happening again, one of the things that we can offer as content creators is really fast turnaround. So, and I think businesses know that, so they're more apt to maybe work with us from a marketing perspective to start getting the word out on social media, on blogs, et cetera, quickly, that they're open for business. And I think I told you that in one of my Facebook groups for blogging, I think it was a couple weeks ago, Chinese tourism destinations were already starting to reach out to bloggers about what they could do. So I expect that when things come back, we'll see a lot of that, or I hope so.
Okay, well, let's hope it picks up pretty lively. Like I said, I don't want to be prematurely optimistic. But one of the questions that we've asked all of our panelists in the past is, look, how are you coping at the moment and how are we going to cope into the future? And I want to use a question that came from one of our attendees. I'm sorry, it scrolled past me on the screen there. I've no idea who asked. You know who it is, and we'll credit you later. Thank you, though. I think it's a good question. And I did ask Kim. But Sherry, can you give us maybe a sense of how do we build our brand in the meantime, or how do we maintain our brand in the meantime? What can we be doing today to get that going? Alex and Tom, you're next for the same question. But Sherry, any tips? Is it start working on great content? Is it start working on great content strategies? Give me a sense of what you'd recommend to folks generally.
You know, I think certainly from the blogging standpoint, but I think this holds true for lots of businesses, especially small businesses. If you do have those newsletters or ways that you can speak to your audience, that's a great thing to keep going. It doesn't cost much. You can do that, be real. People are looking for connection at this time, and it's so important. And so I think that right there can help you build your brand. I think that's probably one of the most important things is remember everyone is looking for connection at this time, and you can do that rather easily.
Now, I'm going to call him out because it's literally just on screen in front of me here. Timothy O'Neill Dunn, thank you. I have you on my radar for a future episode, but he does call out on chat there that one critical point for brand is integrity and honesty for effective communication. I think that's absolutely correct as well. Sherry, thank you as well for joining us on today's show. I'm going to let Alex have the last word. Tom, same question to you. And I know you've some of the same perspectives maybe as Kim and Sherry, but do you have anything else that we could be looking at from a branding perspective between now and when things start to pick up again?
I think people at the moment need to be showing empathy for their customers, the pains, the aspirations, the desires, the challenges that they're going through. And like Sherry said, it's about connecting with them and being authentic. I think it's also knowing yourselves and doing a sort of an introspective exercise of what your company is and what it provides and how it can help people, and taking this time to empathize with your community. I noticed in the DMO space that Santa Rosa has been saying on the West Coast that we're thinking about our visitors at this very moment in time, and we look forward to picking up with you again when this is all over. I think that was a very good strategy from a DMO. If you do anything beyond that, then you're going to do a lot of brand damage. So,
absolutely. Tom, I hope we'll have a pint together sometime before it's too long, and I'd really like to have you back on as well for a longer chat. It's been great having you on. But the last word today, I'm going to leave it with Alex Bainbridge. Alex, from our previous podcasts, and I know there's a wealth of knowledge to share there, but in one or two pithy points, what are the things that we can be doing today to keep the brands going for when things turn around?
I think there's two things. I mean, the problem in tours and activities is that often those relationships are only created when you actually go to the destination. So in many ways, you can't maintain a relationship that doesn't already exist. So we're really in the sort of phase of being creative about recreating those kind of discovery problems that you have when you go to a destination and are thinking, what can I do? So
it's a visibility problem.
It's a visibility problem. So I mean, people haven't even got to the point of working out which destinations they might want to travel to in 2021. A lot of tours and activities is based around cities, and maybe customers will shift and want to go to countryside or whatever. So we haven't even begun to talk about consumer behavior changes. We've just, so I think there probably isn't that much. If you're a local tour and activity company, day tour, then there's not much you can do because those relationships don't exist between you and your client base. Multi-day is slightly different, or activity based, where let's say you go on your annual diving trip or your annual ski trip. But I think, but the two concepts that people are doing are things like I said, online quizzes, sort of using your tour guides to do webinars, etc. Whether or not that is successful or not to be seen. I kind of hope it will, but it's kind of interesting. But that might work if we've got a sort of a 3 or 4 month scenario. I don't know whether or not people could be able to keep that up for 12 months.
Okay, well, hopefully cabin fever is enough of a motivator to get people back in, up and going again. Like I said, I hope this doesn't last too long, and we'll be cautiously optimistic as we look to this same topic in future episodes. Thank you all, three of you that remain, for joining us today. You've been listening and watching to the live show from Travel Massive. This is a production of the Travel Massive team run by Maria Stoyanova in Sofia. I'm Kevin O'Shaughnessy, based in Dublin. You've been listening to contributions from Alex Bainbridge of Otura, Sherry Ott of Ott's World, Tom Buckley of I Have Forgotten Tom and You'll Kill Me Wildebeest, and Kim Whitaker of Once Travel. Thank you so much for your contributions today. There have been some great chat messages coming through in the chat window here on the Zoom webinar. I want to have at least 2 or 3 of the contributions on as a future guest, so we'll be in touch about that afterwards. If you enjoyed this show, please share a link to it or the podcast episode to a colleague or friend. And if you'd like to take part in a future episode, whether it's for a question, to give us an idea of what kind of content you'd like us to cover, or even to suggest somebody you'd like to, you think we should have take part, please drop us a line. It's live@travelmassive.com. And on that note, for everything that we're doing here, we'll publish it back over on the travelmassive.com blog. It's been great talking to you today. It is Thursday, the 19th of March, and this is episode 3 of the live show. Thank you very much.